Hello everyone and welcome back to Coach Craig Sports. Today is Monday, so this is going to be the top 5 performers at each position video. I'm going to be looking at the top 5 players from running back, quarterback, wide receiver, and tight end from this past week. And then I'll list some other notable performances as well. Just kind of talk about the players, if I see this repeating or if I don't. Most of these will be pretty quick though. We'll start off at quarterback. We got Patrick Mahomes. 278 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception, 26 rushing yards, 41.72 points. It's pretty easy to say Patrick Mahomes is going to be up in the top 5 quarterbacks more often than not, so not too much to say here. This is a performance that's probably going to be repeated at some point during the season. Matt Ryan, however, coming in at quarterback number 2, 283 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 17 rushing yards, 37.02 points. Honestly, I was kind of shocked by this. Matt Ryan has not looked very good so far this season. So this might just be a testament to the Washington defense not being as good as we think it is, because they've allowed a ton of passing yards so far this season and a lot of efficiency in that regard as well. You know, Matt Ryan may be a streamable quarterback in good matchups, but that's probably going to be what his ceiling is this season. And quarterback number 3, I'm not a big proponent of Sam Darnold. Maybe I'll admit I was wrong, but at the same time, Sam Darnold has not played against the greatest competition on defense. Yes, he played the Saints defense the 1 week, but they were without Marshawn Lattimore and C.J. Gardner-Johnson as well, so it was a pretty cake matchup at that point in time. I want to see him do it against a little bit tougher competition. However, the Panthers' schedule is like a cakewalk most of the season, besides playing Tampa Bay and the Patriots defense, I want to say. Obviously, Washington's defense is on there if they ever turn it around, but at this point in time, Sam Darnold's looking like a quarterback you can stream pretty much in good matchups, maybe even play every week if you really, really need to, which is kind of shocking to say coming into the season. 301 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions though. And at least one of those interceptions was a pretty bad interception as well. 35 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. He has 5 rushing touchdowns on the season somehow. Not sure how that's happening, but he's been more involved with his legs. But if you go back to his time at USC, he was more effective when he was kind of on the move as well. 35.54 fantasy points, so pretty solid day for him once again. Dak Prescott comes in at number 4, only 188 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 35 rushing yards, 35.02 fantasy points. We've seen Dak Prescott's name up here a couple times already this season, so he's going to be up here more times than not. Then last but not least, we got Taylor Heinicke, the other end of that Atlanta-Washington game. 290 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 43 rushing yards, 33.9 fantasy points. So Taylor Heinicke is going to be a guy that you could probably stream in favorable matchups going forward. He's looked pretty good so far, though, and put up really good fantasy performances, obviously. I believe he was in last week's waiver wire video as well. A couple other notable performances that we did have. Jalen Hurts, the Eagles didn't look very good against the Chiefs, but Jalen Hurts still put up a respectable performance. And then Daniel Jones over 400 yards passing against the Saints team that, we think kind of has a decent defense when all their players are healthy, and it seemed like most of their players were healthy in this game. So, a little bit of tip of your cap to Daniel Jones this week. And then last but not least, Trey Lance, who's probably going to be the hottest waiver wire pickup for Week 5. Because Jimmy Garoppolo went out with a calf injury. Trey Lance played about half the game, and he ended up with 24 fantasy points. So if you're getting that out of half a game, just imagine what you can get out of a full game. It was against the Seattle defense, though, so you got to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt as well. But definitely an exciting prospect in terms of what he can do both through the air and on the ground. We'll get moved over to the running back position, and you'll see here there's a lot of other notable performances because it was a very good week for the running back position. But number 1, Cordero Patterson. 6 carries, 34 yards, 5 receptions, 82 yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns. He's not on the field a lot, but when he's on the field, apparently he's getting the ball and he's doing things with it. So he's definitely somebody to look at going forward. Definitely probably somebody that's going to be in your rosters more often than not for the rest of the season, especially if the Atlanta Falcons team continue to use him the way they have been using him. And then number 2, looks like Saquon Barkley's kind of back now. 13 carries, 52 yards, 1 rushing touchdown, and then he had 5 receptions for 74 yards and a receiving touchdown. I believe that was the touchdown that ended up winning the game for them. So I'll just go back and apologize real quick. I did look back up, and I seen that Cordero Patterson still had 28.2 points there. He actually ended up with 34.6 points, so I do apologize for that, but once again, Saquon Barkley, 29.6 points. He was number 2 on the list. Then number 3 was Derrick Henry, who everybody thought was going to smash pretty good this week. He still had a solid, respectable day. Not as good as we probably thought he would have had against this Jets defense, so props up to the Jets defense and the team as a whole since they did get the win. 33 carries, 157 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 receptions for 20 yards, and 25.7 points overall. So another solid performance once again for Derrick Henry. He's a guy that's going to be on this list more often than not as well. Then David Montgomery had a very, very effective game against the Detroit Lions. 23 carries, 106 yards, and 2 touchdowns, 22.6 points. Unfortunately, this is going to be his last time on this list for this season. He did tear his ACL in this game, so, thoughts go out to him, his health, his family, his safety, and just hopefully he can recover and come back solid next season. And then last but not least was Najee Harris, who had 15 carries, 462 yards, 1 touchdown. Then he also chipped in with 6 receptions for 29 yards. So we've seen him involved in the passing game quite a bit the last 2 weeks. 21.1 points. So he's a guy that, his work in the passing game is definitely going to help him be up there in that top end of the running backs week to week, making the top 5 a couple weeks out of the season in total. A couple other notable performances that we did have. We had Kenneth Gainwell, very involved in the passing game for the Eagles as they were trailing the Kansas City Chiefs. Still didn't see much more of a snap share compared to Miles Sanders like we've been seeing, but he's a guy that if you know the Eagles are going to be in a negative game script going into the game, he's probably going to be a decent play in that matchup. James Robinson looked pretty good on Thursday night. James Conner ended up with 2 touchdowns. He was a guy that I'm going to have to apologize to a couple people because I said to sit James Conner because I thought this would kind of be more of a back-and-forth game, wouldn't really favor James Conner, but fortunately for him, unfortunately for me, the Cardinals took pretty good control of this game, and he ended up with those 2 rushing touchdowns. Then we got Jonathan Taylor over 100 yards and a rushing touchdown. Looked pretty good in this matchup. Ezekiel Elliott looked great once again. Clyde Edwards-Helaire over 100 yards on the ground on 14 carries and a receiving touchdown. And then Chase Edmonds, I believe he had 120 yards and then was involved in the passing game as well. So very good day for the running back position overall. Definitely names to keep your eyes out on there going forward. Then we move over to the wide receiver position. So we're going to start off with Tyreek Hill, who just had a monster day. 12 targets, 11 receptions, 186 yards, 3 touchdowns, 47.6 points. This was a nice performance to see out of him after 2 down weeks. Is Tyreek Hill, so his name can be at the top of this list on any given week. Deebo Samuel, 12 targets, 8 receptions, 156 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then he also ran the ball once for 1 yard on the ground as well. 35.7 points. So far, he's been very solid this season. The targets are still there. So until he shows us otherwise, until he gets injured, he's probably going to be a guy that's going to be a fixture in your lineup. I will say that the 1 touchdown was just super broken defense. So Seattle essentially played a cover 3, or what I assume to be a deep cover 3 shell. The corner went on the in-breaking route, the deep in route with, I believe, Brandon Ayuk, and the safety also took that route too. So there was nobody on that deep third. Linebacker or the slot corner covered the flat. So there was just nobody on Deebo Samuel for about 20 yards. So it was pretty easy pitch and catch for Trey Lance, and then Deebo Samuel just had to run like the extra 30 yards for a touchdown. Then we got DJ Moore, who obviously is one of my favorite wide receivers in the game. 12 targets, 8 receptions, 113 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He also ran the ball once for 6 yards, 31.9 points. We've seen him be very, very effective this season. I think the lowest point total he's got on the season is 15 points in PPR formats. So he's a guy that's going to be in your lineup every week. Don't worry about him this year. If you got Robbie Anderson, maybe a little bit more worried, though. Then we move down to Terry McLaurin, and he had 13 targets, 6 receptions, 123 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So 30.3 points. Even with Taylor Heineke playing quarterback, Terry McLaurin has looked very, very safe, even though his name is Scary Terry, but not scary for your roster, scary for the opposing team. And then we got Deontay Johnson coming up in the number 5 spot, 13 targets, 9 receptions, 102 yards, 1 touchdown, and we got 24.2 points. So he looked pretty healthy in this game, played a ton of snaps, not worried about him moving forward. Then a couple other notable performances. I just tried to keep this one really, really short since the running back position was very long at that, and I could have added even more running backs. But Randall Cobb had 2 touchdowns, Corey Davis had 2 touchdowns, and shout out to Khalif Raymond because he had 2 touchdowns, which was 1 more touchdown in this game than he's had for the rest of his entire career, which I believe has been about 4 or 5 years now, kind of floating between teams, but he's kind of becoming a little bit of a permanent role, permanent fixture for this Detroit Lions team, and maybe somebody to keep your eye on going forward. Then last but not least, we got the tight end position, and this is the most filed up position week to week. Just look at the names of these guys that are up here on the top 5 this week. Going into your fantasy draft, would you have drafted any one of these 5 players? The answer is likely not. So, we'll get into it a little bit. CJ Uzomah, 6 targets, 5 receptions, 95 yards, 2 touchdowns. Great on Thursday Night Football, 26.5 points overall. If T. Higgins is back, he's probably not going to get very many targets, but it is nice to see him looking a little bit better coming off his Achilles injury. So he's definitely somebody to keep an eye on. Not really a priority at this point in time. Dawson Knox, who everybody seems to love right now, and maybe this is the year he finally does it. I'm not quite there yet, but we'll probably talk a little bit more about that on waivers tomorrow. He had 8 targets in this game, 5 receptions, 37 yards, and 2 touchdowns, so 20.7 points overall. Solid game for him. Give him props. He's had a lot of touchdowns this year. You think at some point that's going to fall off. Maybe he has that crazy Robert Tonyan season, but we'll just have to see if it happens or not. Then Mo Alley Cox. So Jack Doyle's kind of banged up throughout practice this week. Jack Doyle only ended up playing about 30% of snaps in this game. Mo Alley Cox played exactly 69%, I believe, which is nice. But 5 targets, 3 receptions, 42 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Probably not a repeatable performance. I guarantee there's like nobody that actually played Mo Alley Cox this week, unless you're in like a deep dynasty league that starts 2 tight ends or something like that. 19.2 points. Probably not a repeatable performance going forward unless Jack Doyle were to miss. Then Dalton Schultz, and he's somebody that probably should have made my waivers video last week. He had 8 targets in this game, 6 receptions, 58 yards, 1 touchdown, almost had a 2-point conversion as well, but then I believe he dropped the ball, so didn't quite work out for him there, but 17.8 points. Looking pretty good so far. These tight ends are pretty involved for this Cowboys offense, and we know Dak Prescott loves to target the tight end position. Then last but not least, we got Max Williams, former second-round bust for the Baltimore Ravens. Second time in the top 5 this year. So it's 50-50 shot. 2 weeks he's not been startable, and the other 2 weeks he's done pretty well. So maybe he's somebody to look at going forward. But 5 targets, 5 receptions, 66 yards, 1 touchdown, 17.6 points. It is also important to note he's caught 15 out of the 16 passes he's received so far this year. And I believe this game was his lowest snap count percentage at 58%. So a lot of things working in his favor and a lot of things working against him as well. So it'll be real interesting to see what he does throughout the rest of the season. Couple other notable performances. Mike Gesicki looked pretty good once again. Noah Fant saw 10 targets in this game. Maybe he's the leading pass catcher for the Denver Broncos overall. Maybe it was just the matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. And then last but not least, we had Dallas Goedert had a solid game. I believe he had a touchdown, about 60-some yards. Zach Ertz also looked decent in that game as well. You know, there was a relatively good amount of tight ends that looked pretty solid this week for double-digit performances and stuff like that. We even had Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith both score last night, so pretty good overall week for the tight end position. Not exactly the guys we would have expected going into it. Kind of a dud for Travis Kelce, but hey, that's what the tight end position is. It's going to be volatile week to week, and hopefully you get a guy that you feel comfortable starting every week, or you just hopefully grab the guy that gets the touchdown on any given week. But that's kind of what it is this season. But with that being said, that's all I have for today's video. Hopefully you all enjoyed. If you think I missed anyone in terms of like notable performances, like I said, there was a ton of running backs this week. There's a ton of guys I could have listed for notable performance, probably a running back and wide receiver as well. A little bit more on that tight end, but it was a good week for fantasy overall, honestly. And there was some duds there, but there was definitely some guys that stepped up and hopefully helped out your team. But if you guys are new to my channel, please consider subscribing. It helps to build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports, which is one that's truly for you, the viewers, helping you with your fantasy football, helping you with your DFS, whether it's NFL or NBA. Talking a little bit of NFL news, there was a lot of injuries this week too, so we'll probably get into that, whether it's in a different video this week or in the start sits on Saturday. But definitely a lot of guys to keep an eye out on. And then with that being said, if you are a new or current subscriber who's yet to do so, also hit that notification down below. It's going to let you know every single time I post up a new video. Tomorrow is Tuesday, so that will be the waiver wire video. So that's one where I go through, break down quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, defenses that are less than 50% rostered on both Yahoo and ESPN, and just kind of suggest who would be good pickups and the percentage of fab I would be comfortable spending on them. But with that being said, that's all I have for today's video. Once again, hopefully you guys all enjoyed. And then last but not least, special shout out to each and every one of you watching today's video. Truly do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this video. Definitely means a lot to me, and I hope each and every one of you has a great rest of your day.